Live from Nasdaq's MarketSite, I'm your host, Christina Ayanian. And joining me today is CEO and co-founder of Ossium Health, Kevin Caldwell. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Christina.
Talk to me about Ossium and your mission.
Okay. So our mission at Ossium is to improve the health, longevity, and vitality of human beings through bioengineering. The principal way in which we do that is that we're developing a pipeline of cellular therapeutics aimed at improving treatments for diseases of the blood and immune system. And our initial focus is on improving both the accessibility and the quality of treatments for leukemia. Down the road, we have treatments for organ rejection and even some orthopedic products in the pipeline.
It really is life-changing work, and it's a very powerful mission. Talk to me how you're working towards that goal.
So bone marrow transplants have been the principal therapy used to treat patients with blood cancers for more than 70 years. When we do a bone marrow transplant, we're permanently replacing the blood and immune system of one human being with the blood and immune system of another for the rest of the recipient's life. They will produce blood and immune cells with the genetics of another human being. It's an incredibly powerful procedure that can be used to treat a broad range of blood and immune diseases, including AML and ALL. The problem is that even though this life-saving treatment is available, many patients who are diagnosed with these indications and go looking for a bone marrow donor ultimately don't receive one. Up until now, our entire bone marrow transplant and leukemia treatment ecosystem has been based on volunteer living donors, and our organ transplant ecosystem has been primarily based on deceased organ donors. One of our fundamental innovations at Ossium is the realization that it's possible to use the same healthy donors that are used for solid organ transplants for bone marrow transplants, and we've built the world's first organ donor-based bone marrow bank. This enables us to process and cryopreserve bone marrow in advance and transform it from a service that's done after a patient is diagnosed with a hematologic malignancy and is getting increasingly frail by the day to a product that we make in advance and cryopreserve in our facility that's available off the shelf for a patient who needs it. And so the idea is to dramatically accelerate the timeline for when these procedures can be done to improve our ability to characterize the graft prior to the transplant. We can tell you exactly the number and the characteristics of the cells that we've recovered from the donor because it's all made in advance and available to the doctor. We're also able to do really rigorous screening on the donors in advance. And so the goal here is to take the number of patients who go looking for a bone marrow transplant and ultimately receive one up from about the 55 to 60% it's at today, closer to 90%. And to use the cells that we get as a foundation for a pipeline of cell therapies that is virtually unlimited. There's an incredible amount of innovation that can be built upon the resource that we've developed.
That's really incredible. You're using cutting-edge technologies to drive the accessibility and enhance the accessibility of bone marrow-derived products.
Exactly.
How can patients access that bone marrow bank?
So today we're working in partnership with the National Marrow Donor Program, Be the Match Registry. This is the United States' registry of bone marrow donors. They're the largest bone marrow donor registry in the world, and they do more bone marrow transplants than any organization in the world. They've been tremendous partners of ours, and we are working with them to do a study in which we are using our hematopoietic progenitor cell marrow product for patients with acute myeloid leukemia and acute lymphoid leukemia. And so if a patient, if you're a physician with a patient who needs a donor, and in particular, if you're having trouble finding a donor for your patient, the idea behind this study is that we can enable a bone marrow transplant for them and do so quickly. So that's the first way. If you're not at if the person isn't at a transplant center that's participating in it, we also have some ability to look at this case by case, and so we'd encourage the physician to reach out to the National Marrow Donor Program.
That's really interesting. It seems like you're hitting so many different aspects of patients' needs, and you're also using this technology to fuel a new segment in this space, orthopedics. Talk to me about that.
That's right. So, fundamentally, Ossium is a cell therapy company, and our capabilities and team that we've built over the last 7 years since our 2016 founding has primarily been based on using the bone marrow within the bone that we receive from the organ donors for cell therapy products. Up until just like a little more than a year ago, we were really thinking of the bone as a medical waste product, and so we were actually paying to have it properly disposed of. What we've come to understand over the last year and a half is that there's really a tremendous unmet need for healthy bone that can be used for patients who need a viable bone matrix as a graft, perhaps after a serious traumatic injury that damaged a bone, or because they needed a spinal fusion. And so because of the quality of the donor pool that we have, these organ donors are generally people who were young and healthy at the time of death, and because of the quality of the recoveries that we do, we're able to keep the cells in the bone viable, and that enables us to produce very high quality orthopedic products that we are looking forward to bringing to the market soon.
It's really interesting how your products impact such diverse therapeutic areas.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the way that we think about this is that there are some fundamentally hard problems that have limited the rate at which cell therapies in particular, these sort of living drugs that we develop, have been able to ultimately commercialize and scale. And one of them is, one, accessibility to donors for the cells, and two, sort of high integrity, really reliable manufacturing processes. So our vision is that if we can really industrialize those early steps in the process and make the experience of making these cell therapies closer to what the experience of manufacturing a pharmaceutical product is, then we can really not just release one or two drugs, but sort of dramatically increase the pace at which sort of cell therapies and now sort of bone products for a huge range of indications are developed. And so we're really excited about the impact ultimately for millions of patients.
That's amazing. What's next for Ossium?
So one of the most exciting applications of our organ donor-based bone marrow banking platform is enabling those same patients who receive organs from our donors to also receive stem cell infusions from their organ donors. And so the basic idea is this: under standard of care, if you get an organ transplant, in general, the organs cannot be perfectly matched. And so the recipient of the organ is on some amount of immunosuppression for the rest of their lives. This enables them to tolerate the organ that they've received for some time, but it also means that they have a weakened immune system and they have an elevated risk of infection, even cancer over time. Also, the organs are ultimately rejected anyway. A typical kidney is good for about 10 to 12 years if it's mismatched after the transplant. And so with a procedure called immune tolerance induction, we can provide the organ recipient what we call a chimeric immune system, which means they're making blood and immune cells from both their native bone marrow and their organ donor's bone marrow at the same time. And what we found is that this chimeric immune system can sort of tolerate or accept the organ without rejection. And so we have some proprietary protocols we've developed for this that are incredibly promising, and those are things that we'll explore down the road.
That's incredible. Well, Kevin, it's definitely clear that you're pushing the boundaries of what's possible in cell therapy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. We look forward to continue following.
Thank you for having me.